My name is Leah Thompson, and for 15 years I was the resident creative type in a family of staunch pragmatists, which in their language translated to lovable, pitiable failure. The founder of Thompson Interactive, a name that means nothing to them but is about to mean everything. After 15 years of being the family charity case, the one they pitied at Thanksgiving, the truth was about to detonate. They thought I was barely scraping by as a digital doodler, a quaint term my father coined. They had no idea I was about to land on the cover of Forbes as one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. The irony was a bitter pill I'd swallow daily, but soon multiple truths would be revealed. Not just about my net worth, which frankly is the least interesting part, but about who they truly are, and who I had to become in the suffocating vacuum of their disapproval. For years, their casual dismissals, their patronizing smiles, their well-meaning but utterly corrosive advice felt like tiny paper cuts. Innocuous, one by one, but accumulated over a decade and a half, they nearly bled me dry of self-worth, leaving scars no one could see. The carefully constructed facade of the struggling artist was about to crumble, and I, for one, couldn't wait to sift through the wreckage. If you've ever felt like the black sheep, the underestimated one in your family, or simply invisible when you desperately needed to be seen, comment and subscribe. This isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's ever had to build their own validation from the ground up. Trust me, if you've ever yearned to prove them all wrong, if you've ever fantasized about the moment their jaws hit the floor, this story will change how you see family success and the sweet, sweet taste of vindication forever. My childhood wasn't one of overt neglect, not in the material sense. We lived in a sprawling Phoenix estate, all terracotta tiles, and desert landscaping, the kind of place that looked impressive in Christmas card photos. But emotional currency. That was a different story, a currency hoarded and dispensed with baffling selectivity. I was a quiet child, always sketching in notebooks, lost in worlds I built on paper, and later on a clunky desktop computer my dad bought for educational purposes, meaning for my older brother Chris. I was fascinated by the nascent internet, by the idea of creating entire universes from lines of code and pixels. My early digital art, crude as it was, felt like magic to me. To my family, it was a peculiar, time-wasting hobby. My father, Robert Thompson, was and still is an accountant. Not just any accountant. He built Thompson & Associates from a 2-room office into a respectable, mid-sized firm. He's a man of spreadsheets and bottom lines, tall and imposing, usually found in a bespoke suit. His voice a baritone that brokered deals and delivered pronouncements with equal, unshakable authority. For him, value was tangible, measurable, preferably with a healthy ROI. My digital dreamscapes did not compute. My mother Elaine was the quintessential society wife. Perfectly coiffed, her wardrobe a testament to seasonal designer collections, her days filled with charity luncheons and maintaining the family's social standing. Her concern for me was always expressed in a soft, almost pitying tone, usually accompanied by a sigh. "Are you eating enough, dear, this art thing? It's not very stable, is it? Perhaps a nice teaching degree?" Stability for Mom meant marrying well or having a job that sounded impressive at dinner parties. Virtual artist was neither. Then there was Chris, 2 years my senior, the golden child from the moment he aced his first spelling test. He was everything I wasn't: athletic, outgoing, and crucially, he mirrored my father's ambitions. He breezed through school, captained the debate team, and his path to a Harvard MBA and a plum position at Dad's firm seemed preordained and celebrated at every turn. He inherited Dad's pragmatism, but wore it with an air of smug entitlement that always made my skin crawl. Tessa, my younger sister by 3 years, was an echo absorbing the family's values like a sponge. She quickly learned that aligning with Chris and an approved corporate America career path earned praise while my pursuits earned, well, mostly silence or a condescending head tilt. The examples of favoritism and injustice weren't isolated incidents. They were the very fabric of our family life. I remember Chris presenting a lopsided birdhouse in 5th grade, constructed with more glue than wood, and Dad rhapsodized about his nascent engineering talent. And that same week, I won a district-wide digital art competition, a complex animation I'd spent months on, and showed them the certificate. "Oh, that's nice, dear," Mom said, her eyes already drifting towards the financial news Dad was watching. "Don't let it distract you from your real studies." When Chris got into our local state university for business, there was a celebratory dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. When I received a significant scholarship to a prestigious art and design college out of state, the reaction was muted. "But Leah, is that a real career?" Dad had asked, his brow furrowed. "What kind of job security is there in making pictures on a computer?" The disparity continued. Family funds flowed freely for Chris's Harvard MBA application fees, tuition, and living expenses. It was an investment. When I tentatively asked for a small loan to upgrade my aging computer, essential for my coursework, I was told to get a real job to fund your hobby. The irony of needing a real job to fund the education for my hobby career wasn't lost on me. Thanksgiving dinners were a masterclass in this dynamic. The conversation inevitably revolved around Chris's finance internships, his networking successes, the intricacies of market fluctuations. "Tell us about that exciting project at Goldman Sachs," Dad would boom. If I dared mention a breakthrough in a new rendering software or a particularly challenging design project, I'd get a polite, "Oh, that's interesting, Leah," before the subject was deftly steered back to Chris. Tessa, by then a teenager, would often smirk, whispering to Chris, "Still playing with your computer crayons, Leah." Even Tessa's minor milestones were amplified. Her acceptance into a management training program at some faceless corporation was met with a family brunch and pronouncements of her sensible choices. When I made my first significant freelance sale, $500 for a logo design, which felt like $1 million to me, and shared the news, Mom's response was, "Well, that's something. But can you live on that, dear? You need benefits, a pension." My early talent, the signs that this hobby was actually a profound skill, were consistently ignored or downplayed. My high school art teacher, Mrs. Albright, a vibrant woman with paint perpetually under her fingernails, had called my parents in. "Leah has a rare gift." She'd told them her portfolio of my digital landscapes and character designs spread across her desk. "She sees the world differently. Her technical skills are already at a collegiate level." My parents had listened politely, thanked her, and then on the drive home, Dad had said, "She's a nice woman, but a bit eccentric. Don't get your head filled with unrealistic ideas, Leah. Art is a fine pastime." It wasn't that they were cruel in a theatrical, villainous way. It was more insidious, a slow, steady erosion of my confidence through 1,000 dismissals, a constant underlining of my perceived inadequacy compared to the sensible paths chosen by my siblings. I was the family's creative outlier, the project they worried about, the one whose future was a question mark they filled in with their own anxieties and preconceived notions of success. This deep, unacknowledged well of hurt became the emotional bedrock of my hidden ambition, a silent vow that one day, somehow, they would see. Not just see my art, but see me. The years after I left for art college didn't change the pattern. They merely solidified it, etching it deeper into my psyche. Each family gathering, every holiday, every phone call home became a fresh opportunity for my achievements to be minimized and Chris's utterly conventional progress to be lionized. The cycle of disappointment was relentless, a metronome ticking away at my sense of belonging. My graduation from the Rhode Island School of Design, top of my class with honors in digital media, was a milestone I'd naively hoped might shift their perspective. They didn't attend. Dad cited a crucial accounting conference he couldn't possibly miss, and Mom had a long-standing charity gala. They sent a tasteful, generic congratulatory card and a check that felt more like an obligation fulfilled than a celebration. 2 years later, when Chris graduated with his Harvard MBA, my parents threw a lavish party at their country club. Speeches were made. Toasts were raised to the future of Thompson and Associates. I stood in a corner nursing a glass of champagne, feeling like a ghost at their feast. The contrast wasn't just stark, it was a physical ache. My early career was a series of carefully concealed stepping stones. I worked under an alias Art Vixen, building a portfolio in the nascent world of virtual design and crypto art. When I landed my first major freelance contract, designing a complex virtual environment for an indie game studio, a project worth tens of thousands of dollars, I was bursting to share the news. I called home excited. "That's great, honey," Mom said, her voice distracted. "Listen, Chris just got a promotion. He's a junior associate now. Your father is so proud. He even gets his own office, a small one, but still." The conversation has always pivoted. My significant achievement became a footnote to Chris's incremental climb up the corporate ladder. Later, I won an obscure but incredibly prestigious award in the international digital art community for a groundbreaking piece of generative art. The prize money was substantial enough to fund my secret startup, Thompson Interactive, for its first year. I framed the certificate a beautiful modern design. When my parents visited my tiny and deliberately unglamorous Tempe studio apartment, a key part of my struggling artist persona, Mom spotted it on the wall. "Oh, another one of your online things." She'd asked, a polite but vacant smile on her face, before turning her attention to the wilting plant on my windowsill. "Are you remembering to water this dear?" Meanwhile, Chris's every minor success was magnified. He got a small raise, and Dad took us all out to dinner to celebrate Chris's financial acumen. He moved from a cubicle to an office with a door, albeit one with frosted glass, and Mom gushed for weeks about how he was truly making his mark. His efforts were never mediocre in their eyes. They were affirmations of their own values, their own choices, reflected back at them. My internal monologue during those years was a tempest of frustration, hurt, and a growing cold resolve. It wasn't just that they didn't see my world, they actively refused to. It was a language they didn't want to learn, a currency they didn't value. And the silence, the polite nods, the quick changes of subject, they were louder than any overt criticism. It wasn't hatred I felt, not then. It was a profound aching invisibility. Each dismissal was another brick in the wall I was building around my true life, another layer of insulation for the secret empire I was slowly, painstakingly creating. The resentment wasn't a raging fire. It was a slow burn fueling a determination so intense it sometimes scared me. Dialogue scenes from that era replay in my mind with painful clarity. One Thanksgiving, a few years into Thompson Interactive's stealthy growth, I'd tentatively mentioned a new programming language I was mastering, one that was revolutionizing 3D rendering. "That's technical Leah," Dad had said, carving the turkey with focused precision. "Chris, tell us about that merger you're assisting with at the firm. Real-world impact, that's what matters." Mom chimed in, beaming at Chris. "Yes, dear, something we can all understand. So exciting." Tessa, then in her early 20s and already climbing her own corporate ladder, let out a small, almost imperceptible snicker. I saw it. I felt it. Another time, a phone call with Mom, Leah Honey. Her voice was laced with that familiar patronizing concern. "I was talking to Mrs. Henderson from the Bridge Club, and her daughter just finished a paralegal course. She said it's very steady work. Are you sure you don't want to consider something like that, just to have something to fall back on? Your father and I, we just worry so much about your future." "Mom," I'd said, my voice tight, "I have a future. I'm building it." "Oh, I know, dear, with your art. But something practical, you know." The implication was clear. My work wasn't practical, wasn't real, wasn't enough. There were thankfully supporting characters in my hidden life. Professor Albright from high school remained a distant but cherished mentor. We exchanged occasional emails, and her belief in my unique vision was a balm to my often wounded spirit. Then there was the anonymous online buyer, a crypto whale who purchased one of my early experimental NFT collections for $50,000. That sale wasn't just about the money. It was a thunderous validation from the outside world, proof that my digital doodling had tangible, significant value. It was the seed money that truly launched Thompson Interactive. And later, there was Samantha, my first employee, who quickly became my indispensable assistant and confidant, the only other person who knew the full extent of my double life. The most recent major disappointment, the one that truly cemented my resolve for what was to come, happened just a few months ago. It was the annual Thompson family summer barbecue held at my parents' sprawling estate. I was by then secretly managing a company valued at over $7 billion. I'd driven there in my beat-up 10-year-old sedan wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt playing my part. I'd made a vague attempt to explain what Thompson Interactive did something about virtual environments and digital assets. Dad, flipping burgers with a proprietary air, had chuckled. "Stick to your little drawings, Leah. Fascinating stuff, I'm sure. But leave the business talk to Chris and me, eh?" Chris had smirked, and Tessa had rolled her eyes. Even my usually polite Aunt Carol had given me a pitying look. That comment, "stick to your little drawings," echoed in my ears for weeks. It was the culmination of 15 years of diminishment. It was then standing by the pool watching them laugh, so secure in their ignorance, that the seed of a much grander, more dramatic reveal began to take root. They wanted me to stick to my little drawings, fine. They had no idea how big those drawings had become. The months following that barbecue were a blur of intense focus and simmering fury. The Forbes journalist, a sharp, tenacious woman named Priya Chen, had been sniffing around my anonymous persona, Art Vixen, for a while. Her inquiries were becoming more specific, connecting Art Vixen to a series of high-profile NFT drops, and then more alarmingly to the rapidly expanding Thompson Interactive. The clock was ticking. The pressure of maintaining the struggling artist illusion was immense. My facade apartment in Tempe, a deliberately run-down shoebox studio, was a constant source of stress. I paid rent on it, kept a few sad-looking art supplies there, and made sure the electricity bill was in my name. Once Tessa had dropped by unannounced just in the neighborhood, and Samantha had to perform logistical miracles to ensure I was discovered, there looking suitably harried and paint-stained instead of in my actual Scottsdale penthouse. "Just working on a new series, Tess," I'd mumbled, gesturing vaguely at a canvas I'd deliberately smudged. "It's slow going." Her pitying smile was almost unbearable. My old car, a battered Honda Civic that was an integral part of my disguise, genuinely broke down on the freeway one sweltering afternoon. I was on my way to a crucial and secret meeting with potential investors for a new Thompson Interactive platform. Chris, who happened to drive by, pulled over. "Rough luck, Leah," he'd said, leaning against his gleaming BMW, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "Still driving this relic. Maybe I can help you look into a sensible loan for something reliable. Dad's firm has some connections." The offer, dripping with smug superiority, made my blood boil. I politely declined, seething inwardly. The constant stress, the compartmentalization, the sheer effort of living two lives began to take a toll. I had a brief health scare, nothing serious, just a series of stress-induced migraines. But my mother, of course, pounced on it. "See, Leah," she'd said, her voice dripping with "I told you so" concern, "all this stress from your passion isn't good for you. Why don't you let your father ask around at the firm? I'm sure they could find a nice, quiet administrative role for you. Regular hours, benefits." The thought of being rescued into a life of quiet desperation by the very people who'd driven me to this exhausting charade was a fresh hell. Then a major anonymous crypto art sale, one of mine, made international headlines. It was a record-breaking sum for a digital original. The news buzzed about the mysterious Art Vixen. And that evening, by sheer painful coincidence, I saw my father on a local business news segment invited as a sensible local voice on financial trends. The host asked him about the booming crypto market. Dad scoffed. "Frankly, it looks like monopoly money for fools to me," he declared with his usual unshakable authority. "Give me tangible assets any day. This digital nonsense is a bubble waiting to burst, mark my words." I watched numb as he dismissed the very foundation of my empire with a wave of his hand. It was then I knew I couldn't just let the Forbes article drop. I had to orchestrate this. The call from Priya Chen at Forbes finally came. "Ms. Thompson," her voice was professional but with an undercurrent of excitement, We have strong, verifiable evidence linking Art Vixen and several major NFT platforms directly to Thompson Interactive and ultimately to you. The valuation is staggering, frankly. We're talking cover story for our 30 under 40 issue, possibly even a broader feature on new tech billionaires. We're going to print in 3 weeks. A cold wave washed over me, then a strange sense of calm. The inevitable had arrived. "Ms. Chen," I said, my voice steady, "this is a lot to take in. I understand you have a story to run. I would, however, appreciate some time to prepare a formal statement, and perhaps, if I can offer an exclusive angle, a more personal narrative, would that be of interest?" "Very much so, Ms. Thompson," she replied, intrigued. "We'd be happy to work with you on that." The game was afoot. Immediately, I called Samantha. She was in a meeting, but I used our emergency code. She picked up on the first ring. "Sam," I said, my voice low and urgent, "cancel all my non-essential appointments for the next 3 weeks. We're activating Project Vindication. Get the G700 fueled and ready. Book the entire staff complement for Thompson Island. And start compiling those missed opportunity portfolios for each member of the Thompson family. Every single condescending remark, every dismissal, every time they chose ignorance over curiosity. I want it documented alongside the corresponding growth chart of Thompson Interactive." "Consider it done, Leah," Samantha said, her voice calm and efficient as always. She didn't ask why. She knew this day was coming. My parents' own backstories, I realized, played a huge part in their inability to comprehend my path. Dad had clawed his way up from a working-class background. Accounting with its rules and predictable outcomes was his salvation, his ticket to stability and respect. He valued tangible assets, hard work he could see and measure, and traditional career trajectories. Anything outside that box felt frivolous, risky, and fundamentally unsound. Mom, on the other hand, had married into modest wealth that Dad then grew. Her identity was tied to social standing, appearances, and conformity. Her anxieties about me were less about financial ruin, though that was part of it, and more about social embarrassment. An artist daughter who dabbled was one thing. A daughter who genuinely pursued it as a profession, and a bizarre, incomprehensible digital one at that, was a social liability. Their fears, their limitations had been projected onto me with suffocating force. But the impending Forbes article wasn't just a threat anymore. It was an opportunity. A colossal, glaring, undeniable opportunity to reclaim my narrative, to finally be seen, not as they imagined me, but as I truly was. The hurt and resentment that had simmered for 15 years began to transform into a focused, almost icy determination. This wouldn't be an emotional outburst. It would be a meticulously planned, undeniable revelation. Allies and enemies became crystal clear. Samantha was my unwavering rock, my co-conspirator. My early mentor, Professor Albright, to whom I sent a cryptic email hinting at a significant life update, responded with characteristic warmth. "Whatever it is, Leah, I know you'll handle it with the same brilliance you always showed. Fly high." The enemies. My family's ingrained prejudice, their willful blindness, and of course the relentless ticking clock of the Forbes deadline. The stakes were astronomical. My carefully guarded secret, my entire professional identity was about to become public knowledge. This was my one chance, my only chance to orchestrate the reveal on my own terms, to ensure that when the bomb dropped, I was the one holding the detonator. The invitations were designed by one of Thompson Interactive's top graphic artists, understated elegant on heavy cream cardstock embossed in gold. "You are cordially invited to a special family announcement by Leah Thompson. Date, time, and instructions to arrive at a private executive airport. Destination to be revealed." I sent them via special courier to my parents, Chris and Tessa. The RSVPs trickled in, laced with curiosity, and I suspected a healthy dose of bewildered speculation. Mom called almost immediately. "Leah, darling, what on earth is all this mystery?" Her voice was a flutter of confusion and excitement. "A private airport? Is everything all right? You haven't won the lottery, have you?" I smiled a thin, knowing smile. "Something like that, Mom," I said, savoring the understatement. "Just a little family update. You won't want to miss it." They had no idea. They weren't just RSVPing to a reunion. They were RSVPing to the complete and utter dismantling of their world and the spectacular unveiling of mine. The curtain was about to rise on the performance of a lifetime. The Forbes article wasn't a secret I discovered, but its impending publication was the catalyst, the external force that handed me the power to detonate the truth bomb I'd been carefully constructing for years. Priya Chen's call confirming the story was going to print wasn't just an alert, it was an anointing. It solidified in my mind with the objective weight of one of the world's most respected financial publications that my success was not just real, but monumental. It wasn't my opinion anymore. It was about to be a globally recognized fact. This realization shifted something profound within me. The lingering fear of their judgment, the old sting of their dismissal, began to recede, replaced by an almost unnerving sense of clarity and power. The game-changing moment wasn't learning I was rich. I'd known the company's valuation for years. It was the decision to seize control of the narrative. I could have let the Forbes article drop, let them find out like the rest of the world, bewildered and embarrassed. But where was the justice in that? Where was the closure? No, this required something more direct, more educational. I decided to use the article not as a passive reveal, but as the centerpiece of an active, orchestrated confrontation. My emotional processing in the days leading up to Project Vindication was a strange cocktail. There was a thrum of exhilaration, the thrill of finally ending the exhausting 15-year charade. But there was also a peculiar grief, a mourning for the kind of family relationship I'd always craved, but never had the one where support and belief were freely given, not painfully extracted, and beneath it all a steely, almost cold resolve. They built this cage of their perception for me, I thought, reviewing the meticulous plans with Samantha, and I built an empire in its shadow, brick by painstaking brick. Now I was going to show them the bars were always an illusion, a figment of their limited imagination. My internal monologue shifted from defense to offense. For so long, I'd craved their approval, a crumb of recognition. Now I crave their understanding, even if it came packaged with a shockwave that would rattle the foundations of their comfortable assumptions. I wasn't the failure they'd painted me as. In their inability to see beyond their own narrow definitions of success, they were the ones who had failed to see me, failed to support me, failed to believe. The decision to take action crystallized into a multi-stage plan. The private jet was not mere ostentation. It was the first jolt, a disruption of their reality. The private island, Thompson Island, as it was now officially named in the company's property portfolio, was the stage. And the presentations, the documents, the video, those were the irrefutable evidence, the closing arguments in a case 15 years in the making. This wasn't just about showing off wealth, it was about dismantling their narrative of my life and replacing it with the truth in undeniable, excruciating detail. The planning and preparation phase was executed with military precision by Samantha and a small, trusted team within Thompson Interactive, all bound by NDAs thicker than phone books. The Gulfstream G700 is on standby at Scottsdale Executive, fully catered for a flight to the Caribbean. Samantha reported, ticking items off a virtual checklist. Thompson Island resort staff are prepped and briefed. 5-star service, absolute discretion. Tech team is setting up the presentation suite in the main villa now. AV checks scheduled for tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, I meticulously curated the evidence. First, the framed mock-ups of the Forbes cover. I had our design team create several, one featuring Art Vixen in a stylized anonymous silhouette, another with my actual photo overlaid with the headline, Leah Thompson, from digital doodler to Deca billionaire, the secret empire of Thompson Interactive. Then the personalized folders. These were my masterpieces of passive aggression, each one bound in dark blue leather embossed with the Thompson Interactive logo contained a personalized timeline. On one side, specific dates and verbatim quotes, or as accurately as I could recall and transcribe from memory, and old bitter journal entries of their dismissive remarks, their condescending advice, their casual belittlement. On the other side, juxtaposed directly, Thompson Interactive's milestones on those exact same dates: major client acquisitions, funding rounds, valuation leaps, breakthroughs in our proprietary virtual architecture software. And the pièce de résistance, a section detailing how much a token investment, say the $10,000 Dad had so easily advanced Chris for a vaguely defined market research project that yielded nothing, would be worth if they'd had the foresight or even just the basic familial faith to invest in my seed round when I'd nervously, tentatively hinted at needing startup capital years ago. The figures were, to put it mildly, astronomical. Finally, the video. Our top multimedia editor helped me compile it, a 10-minute montage. It opened with grainy photos of my early, clunky digital art, then smoothly transitioned to sophisticated renderings, award announcements, the obscure ones they'd ignored, snippets of Thompson Interactive's groundbreaking virtual worlds, headlines about Art Vixen's record-breaking sales, the company's exponential growth charts, all of this intercut with their voices, or my best recreation of their past condescending remarks, displayed as text on screen against a backdrop of their smiling, oblivious faces from old family photos. The effect was even to me chilling. My outfit for the reveal was chosen with equal care. Not a power suit, not a flashy gown. Instead, a custom-made ensemble in a deep sapphire blue, understated but impeccably tailored, radiating quiet confidence and authority. It was a world away from the paint-splattered jeans and faded band T-shirts they associated with Leah the struggling artist. The RSVPs had all come in, polite, confused, intrigued. Mom called again a few days before the event. "Leah, darling, your father is getting rather agitated by all this secrecy. He keeps asking if you're in some kind of trouble. You're not, are you? It's not one of those multi-level marketing things, is it? Patricia's daughter got caught up in one of those." "No, Mom," I said, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. "It's not multi-level marketing, just a little family update, a significant one. Please just trust me on this. Be at the executive airport at the time specified. Everything will be made clear." The anticipation was a tight knot in my stomach, a mixture of dread and fierce, almost giddy excitement. The stage was set. The actors, unwitting as they were about to make their entrance, and I, the director of this long overdue drama, was ready for the curtain to rise. This wasn't just a revelation, it was a reckoning. The morning of the reveal dawned bright and clear over Scottsdale. I felt a strange, detached calm, the eye of my own personal hurricane. Samantha met me at my penthouse, a knowing look in her eyes. "Showtime, Leah," she asked quietly. "Showtime," I confirmed. My family arrived at the private executive airport hangar in separate cars, their faces a mixture of confusion, irritation, and grudging curiosity. Dad, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak, his voice tight. "All right, Leah, what is all this? Some kind of elaborate joke? We have busy schedules." He gestured impatiently at the sleek, imposing Gulfstream G700 parked on the tarmac, its engines softly whining. "No joke, Dad," I said, my voice even. "This is the first part of the announcement. Please, everyone, let's board." Their eyes widened as they took in the jet. Chris, the Harvard MBA, the one who supposedly understood the world of high finance and luxury, was the first to grasp the implications. His jaw literally slackened. "Leah, this is a G700. This is a $65 million aircraft. How?" "Thompson Interactive Company Transport," I replied smoothly, gesturing them up the stairs. "Please make yourselves comfortable. It's a bit of a flight." Inside the plush cream leather, the polished wood, the discreet cabin attendant offering champagne and canapes only deepened their bewildered silence. Tessa kept shooting nervous glances at me while Mom fumbled with her seatbelt, her usual social poise completely deserting her. Dad just stared out the window, his brow deeply furrowed. The flight to Thompson Island in the Caribbean was filled with a strained, unspoken tension. I offered polite, vague answers to their hesitant questions. Upon descent, as the lush emerald green island ringed with turquoise water came into view with a sprawling, ultra-modern villa complex nestled on a pristine white sand cove, their shock intensified. The final touch was the large circular helipad prominently featuring the TI logo of Thompson Interactive. "Welcome," I said as we disembarked into the warm, scented air, greeted by discreet uniformed staff. "Welcome to my home," and to the Caribbean operational headquarters of Thompson Interactive. The main villa was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and white stone, opening onto breathtaking ocean views. Cool air, subtly scented with frangipani, wafted through the vast, open-plan living area. More staff moved silently, offering refreshments. But the centerpiece of the room was a massive wall-mounted screen, currently dark. My extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had over the years echoed my parents' dismissive sentiments, who had offered their own pitying smiles and unsolicited advice, had been flown in separately on a chartered flight. They were already seated, their expressions ranging from awestruck to deeply perplexed. Their presence amplified the stakes, turning this from a family discussion into a public reckoning. I stood before them, Samantha by my side, a small remote in my hand. My heart was pounding, but my voice when I spoke was steady, carrying clearly in the suddenly silent room. "Thank you all for coming. I know this has been rather unorthodox." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over their faces. My father's stony expression, my mother's anxious fidgeting, Chris's bewildered gape, Tessa's wide, uncertain eyes. "For 15 years, I began. I've lived a certain life in your eyes. Leah, the artistic one. Leah, the one who needed to find a real job. Leah, the family. Well, let's be honest, the family disappointment." A murmur went through the extended family. My immediate family looked uncomfortable. "Today, I want to introduce you to the other Leah, the one you never bothered to see." With a click of the remote, the screen behind me blazed to life. There it was, the Forbes cover mock-up. Leah Thompson, from digital doodler to billionaire, the secret empire of Thompson Interactive. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother visibly paled, her hand flying to her chest. Dad looked as though he'd been punched, his face turning a mottled red, then ashen. Chris stared, his mouth agape, shaking his head in disbelief. Tessa simply looked like she was going to be sick. "Thompson Interactive," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is my company. I founded it 15 years ago. It specializes in virtual architecture, immersive digital environments, and cutting-edge crypto art assets. Its current valuation is just over $10 billion. Another wave of shocked silence, broken only by a few disbelieving whispers from the aunts and uncles. Then I played the video. The 10-minute montage unspooled my early awkward digital creations, then the increasingly sophisticated art, the awards I'd won that they'd dismissed. Interspersed were clips of news anchors talking about the anonymous art vixens' record-breaking sales, sleek animations showcasing Thompson Interactive as revolutionary virtual worlds graphs, illustrating its meteoric financial growth. And woven throughout like a poisonous thread were their words, displayed as stark white text on a black screen. "Is that a real career, Leah? Stick to your little drawings. Are you sure you don't want to consider something practical? Chris is the one with the head for business." I saw tears streaming down my mother's face. Dad was staring fixedly at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. Chris looked physically ill, his smugness completely erased, replaced by a ghastly pallor. Tessa was white-faced, her eyes wide with dawning horror and perhaps shame. The extended family members were a sea of stunned expressions, some looking at my parents and siblings with a new critical awareness. When the video ended, an oppressive silence filled the room. Samantha, on cue, moved gracefully among my core family members, distributing the personalized leather-bound folders. In these folders, I explained my voice devoid of triumph, holding only a chilling neutrality. You will find a detailed history of Thompson Interactive. You will also find a rather personal timeline. On one side, a record of specific instances of your skepticism. On the other, what was actually happening in my professional life and in the growth of this company. For example, Dad, I met his gaze directly for the first time, and he flinched. Remember that $10,000 you so readily gave Chris for his vaguely defined market research trip to Europe, a trip that produced absolutely nothing? If you had chosen to invest that same nominal sum in Thompson Interactive's seed round when I, your daughter, tentatively asked for your belief, if not your money, well, that $10,000 would be worth approximately $587 million today. Dad's head snapped up his face, a mask of disbelief and dawning, gut-wrenching regret. Chris, I turned to my brother, that sensible loan you offered me for a new car when my Honda broke down, Thompson Interactive had just closed a Series C funding round that valued it at $3 billion. I owned 70% of it. Chris looked like he might actually faint. And Mom, my voice softened slightly, but only just. All those times you worried about my stability, my future, urging me to take receptionist courses, I was managing a global team of over 300 employees and negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. Mom just sobbed quietly, unable to speak. Tessa was staring at her folder, her hands trembling. All those times, at Thanksgiving, when we... She stammered, tears welling in her eyes. You weren't struggling. You were... this. Yes, Tessa, I said. This. Suddenly, a figure rose from the back where some business associates, invited by me, were seated. Martin Delgado, my father's longtime business partner and head of Delgado Capital, a man Dad deeply respected and slightly feared. Robert, Martin said, his voice carrying authority, I believe I owe you an apology for not being more direct years ago. Leah, operating under the alias Art Vixen, approached Delgado Capital with a pitch for seed funding for a digital arts platform. It was without a doubt the most brilliant, forward-thinking, and meticulously researched proposal I had seen in over a decade. I invested heavily. It remains the single best investment decision of my entire career. My father looked from Martin to me, his face a maelstrom of shock betrayal and dawning crushing humiliation, his own partner, his own daughter. He sank back into his chair as if his legs could no longer support him. So this entire charade, Chris finally croaked, his voice hoarse, this island, the jet, these folders, it was all just to make us look like complete and utter fools. I looked at him, my brother, the golden child, now so utterly diminished. No, Chris, I said, and for the first time a hint of the deep old pain crept into my voice. It wasn't to make you look like fools. You managed that perfectly well on your own for 15 years. This was to make you see, to make you finally acknowledge a truth you actively chose to ignore. I didn't do this primarily to spite you, though I'll admit your collective, unwavering disbelief was a powerful, if unfortunate, motivator. I did this for me, to prove that my passion was valid, that my vision was real, that the world I was building was just as significant, if not more so, than the narrow one you tried to confine me to. I took a deep breath. The Forbes article goes live tomorrow morning. The world will know. I wanted you, my family, to hear it from me first, to understand the full context. The triumph wasn't loud or boisterous. It was a quiet, profound certainty that settled in my bones. I had taken back my story. The power dynamic in the Thompson family had just been irrevocably, seismically altered. The silence in the villa was no longer just shocked. It was the sound of an old world shattering. The opulent villa, moments before a stage for dramatic revelation, now felt like a beautifully furnished tomb. The lavish buffet of tropical fruits, grilled seafood, and artisan pastries, meticulously prepared by the island's chef, sat largely untouched, a monument to collective appetite loss. A stunned, suffocating silence permeated the air, broken only by my mother's occasional muffled sobs. Mom was the first to try and bridge the chasm I'd just blasted open. She stumbled towards me, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup now a ruin. "Oh, Leah, my baby girl, a billionaire, we are so, so proud." She reached for a hug, her voice thick with emotion that felt opportunistic. "I always knew you had something special in you, always." I sidestepped the embrace, not unkindly, but firmly. "Did you, Mom?" I asked, my voice quiet but unyielding. "Or did you just hope I'd find a nice, sensible husband to take care of me? Did you tell your bridge club about my special talent when I was supposedly barely scraping by?" Her face fell. The attempt at basking in reflected glory had faltered at the first hurdle. She then switched tacks. "We were just worried. We didn't understand all this. This digital world. We just wanted you to be secure." "There's a difference between concern and condescension, Mom," I stated, not cruelly but factually. "And there's a universe of difference between lack of understanding and a willful refusal to learn." Dad remained silent, a statue of mortification. He stared at his untouched folder, then at Martin Delgado, who was now standing discreetly near me, a silent pillar of support. Dad looked visibly older, the confident bluster he usually wore like a bespoke suit entirely stripped away. He avoided my gaze, avoided everyone's. The architect of his own son's unquestioned assent and his daughter's casual dismissal was now confronted with the colossal error of his judgment witnessed by his business partner and his entire extended family. Chris, however, still had some fight left, or perhaps just a wounded ego lashing out. "So this whole thing," he repeated, his voice laced with venom, "this elaborate, expensive setup, it was just to humiliate us, to rub our noses in it." He gestured wildly around the luxurious room, some kind of sick revenge fantasy. Revenge! I considered the word. "No, Chris, this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about forcing you, all of you, to look at the reality you so comfortably ignored for 15 years. The humiliation you feel, that's a consequence of your own actions, your own blindness, not my intention." I paused. "And yes, it was expensive. But as you can see from your folder, Thompson Interactive can afford it. Consider it an educational expense." That last barb hit its mark. He flinched. He muttered something about anyone can get lucky with internet fads, but it lacked conviction, the pathetic bleat of a dethroned prince. Tessa was the quietest. She sat clutching her folder, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. She looked genuinely ashamed, her earlier condescension replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. She didn't try to make excuses. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a complex mix of regret and awe. Of all of them, her reaction felt the most authentic. The extended family was a mixed bag. Some of the aunts and uncles, those who had been most vocal in their pitying remarks over the years, now looked deeply uncomfortable avoiding eye contact. A few of the more opportunistic cousins started to inch closer suddenly, eager to reconnect with their long-lost brilliant cousin Leah. Samantha, ever vigilant, intercepted them with polite but firm efficiency. "Ms. Thompson will connect with everyone in due course," she'd say, effectively creating a protective perimeter. Unexpectedly, a younger cousin, Michael, whom I barely knew, approached me. "Leah," he said, his voice hesitant, "that was incredible. I mean, what you built. I always thought your art was cool, even if no one else got it." It was a small gesture, but it resonated. Martin Delgado clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "Well handled, Leah," he murmured. "Robert," he addressed my father, his voice firm, "you have a remarkable daughter. Perhaps it's time you truly saw her." Dad just nodded mutely, still looking at the floor. As the shock began to wear off, replaced by the awkward reality of what had just transpired, I made an announcement. "The Forbes article, as I mentioned, will be live tomorrow morning. The world will know then. I wanted you to hear it from me first to understand the journey. There are return flights arranged for this evening." I deliberately did not say my jet. Samantha has the details. A subtle power play, yes. They wouldn't be returning in the Thompson Interactive G700. They'd flown in on my dime in luxury. They'd fly back commercially contemplating the new world order. I decided to stay on Thompson Island for a few days with Samantha and Martin to decompress. Watching them depart, a subdued, shell-shocked procession, I felt a profound sense of release, like a massive weight had been lifted. But it wasn't pure, unadulterated joy. There was exhaustion and a strange, lingering emptiness. I had won. I had confronted them with irrefutable proof of their folly, their blindness, their stunned faces, their belated, clumsy attempts at pride, their palpable regret. These were the spoils. But what was the real prize? It wasn't their approval I'd ultimately sought, I realized as I watched their boat head towards the main island's airport. It was my own peace. It was the silencing of the critical inner voice they had helped cultivate, the one that whispered, I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were foolish. That voice was finally blessedly quiet. The victory I understood with sudden clarity was for me. Justice had been served not as a vengeful feast, but as a necessary rebalancing of the scales. The chapter of Leah, the family failure, was definitively, irrevocably closed. 2 years. That's how long it had been since the Thompson Island Accords, as Samantha jokingly called it. 2 years for the fallout to settle, for the new reality to take root. Thompson Interactive, far from being a fad, had soared. We'd launched Nexus, our revolutionary metaverse platform, which became the industry standard for immersive experiences. Our valuation had nearly tripled. I was no longer an anonymous force. I was Leah Thompson, the face on magazine covers. Forbes had been just the beginning, a keynote speaker at global tech conferences, a reluctant but increasingly comfortable public figure. More importantly, I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, living authentically surrounded by people who saw me, valued me, and challenged me in the best possible ways. My Scottsdale penthouse was still home, but Thompson Island was my sanctuary. The family dynamics had, of course, undergone a seismic shift. My father, Robert Thompson, had been hit the hardest. The revelation of my success, coupled with Martin Delgado quietly divesting from Thompson and Associates, and the subsequent subtle blow to the firm's reputation, once whispers of the family drama inevitably and discreetly circulated in Phoenix business circles, had deeply shaken him. About 6 months after the island reveal, I received a package by courier. Inside on his firm's heavy letterhead was a formal, typed apology. It was stiff, devoid of overt emotion, but it acknowledged his significant failings in parental judgment and his profound regret for underestimating my capabilities and dismissing my chosen path. It wasn't warm, but it was accountability. We now had a tentative, respectful, but still somewhat distant relationship. The irony was not lost on me that he now occasionally called to ask for my insights on market trends in the digital space. I kept my advice professional and concise. My mother Elaine had a more visible, if initially clumsy, transformation. The initial shock gave way to an almost overwhelming desire to reclaim her maternal status, now with a billionaire daughter. She started reading articles about the tech industry attempting to understand NFTs and the metaverse, peppering me with endearingly misinformed questions. Leah Darling, is this blockchain like a very, very secure necklace? Her attempts to boast about me at her garden club were now at least rooted in some semblance of reality, even if exaggerated. Our relationship was better, warmer, but I maintained healthy boundaries. The superficial concern was replaced by a genuine, if sometimes overbearing, pride. Chris's trajectory was perhaps the most predictable, and in a way, the saddest. His ego, so inflated for so long, had been utterly deflated. He left Dad's firm a few months after the reveal, unable to face the silent judgment or his father's changed perception of him. He tried to launch a couple of ill-conceived crypto ventures, hoping to strike it rich quickly, but they'd fizzled out due to a lack of genuine understanding and, frankly, effort. The last I heard, he was taking online courses in digital marketing, a humbled man forced to start from scratch. We rarely spoke. The chasm between the golden child and the scapegoat had inverted, and he couldn't seem to find his footing on the new terrain. Tessa, surprisingly, had become the closest thing to a renewed familial bond. A year after the island, she'd called me, her voice raw with emotion, and offered a sincere, heartfelt apology, unprompted and without excuses. She admitted her jealousy, her insecurity, her shame at having been so cruel and dismissive. She'd quit her soulless corporate job and was exploring her own creative talents, taking pottery classes and learning graphic design. "You kind of inspired me, Leah," she'd confessed, to stop living the life everyone expected. Our relationship was still fragile like new spring growth, but it was real. We started having occasional lunches, talking not as the successful sister and the other one, but just as sisters. The extended family mostly kept a respectful distance. The sycophants who had suddenly materialized after the news broke were swiftly and politely rebuffed by Samantha. A few, like my cousin Michael, maintained a genuine friendly connection. Professionally, I'd launched the Art Vixen Foundation, dedicated to supporting young and underrepresented artists in digital and non-traditional media, providing grants, mentorship, and access to technology. It was my way of ensuring others didn't have to face the same walls of incomprehension I had. Personally, I'd found a partner, a kind, brilliant architect named Ben, who loved me for my mind, my humor, and my passions, not my bank balance. He'd known nothing of my wealth when we first met at an art exhibition, and by the time he found out, it was merely an interesting fact, not a defining characteristic. My circle of friends was small, loyal, and wonderfully normal. Reflecting on the journey, I realized the grand reveal on Thompson Island, as dramatic and satisfying as it had been, wasn't about revenge. Not truly. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about shattering the false image they'd constructed. My father's stilted apology, Tessa's genuine turnaround, even my mother's fumbling attempts to understand my world. Those were unexpected and in some ways welcome fruits of that confrontation. But the real enduring win was internal. It was the silence of my own inner critic, the one whose voice had so often echoed their dismissals. She was finally, definitively gone. The peace that settled in its place was worth more than any valuation Forbes could print. I had proven myself right, and in doing so, their being wrong became almost secondary. So what's the deep moral of this very long, very personal saga? I think there are a few. Firstly, your worth is absolutely not defined by those who refuse or are unable to see it. Cling to your vision, especially when it's unconventional. Secondly, sometimes the greatest motivation doesn't come from seeking approval, but from the fierce internal drive to prove not just others wrong, but yourself profoundly right. Build your own validation from the inside out. True success, I've learned, isn't just about the zeros in your bank account or the accolades on your shelf. It's about living authentically, aligning your life with your deepest passions, and having the courage to pursue your own definition of a life well lived, even if it mystifies the people closest to you and family. Family is complicated. You can love them, even forgive them, but you also have a fundamental right to protect your spirit, your dreams, and your hard-won peace from their limitations and their negativity. Sometimes the healthiest love is loving from a safe distance, with very clear boundaries. Have you ever had to fight for your dreams against the people who were supposed to support you most? What was your Thompson Island moment of truth? Or what do you envision it would look like if you could orchestrate it? I'd genuinely love to hear. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the underdog, the dismissed dreamer, or the quiet rebel, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of breaking barriers and forging your own path, and share it with anyone who needs to hear that their unconventional journey is not just valid, but potentially world-changing. Comment below with the lesson from my story that hit home for you, or share a piece of your own experience. Believe in your vision, even if for a while you're the only one who sees it with clarity. Build your empire, whether it's an empire of gold and code or an empire of joy, art, and personal fulfillment. You owe it to yourself. Let's create a community of dream builders and narrative reclaimers right here. support each other, champion each other, because more true stories and some just as true fiction about overcoming, achieving, and finding your own unique version of happily ever after are coming very soon. Trust me on that.